Outside the window, the endless autumn rain drizzled, creating a chilly and gloomy atmosphere that perfectly matched Courtney's mood. The work moved monotonously but briskly. The order was easy, the model was standard, and the fabric was obedient. As the sewing machine clattered, her thoughts smoothly drifted to the world where she felt cosy and comfortable, the world she had shared with Matt. Those had been the best 10 years of her life with her beloved husband. She hadn't needed to spend hours on the sewing machine just to make ends meet. She hadn't had to take responsibility for the family's survival or deal with a multitude of complicated worldly issues. Matt was, without exaggeration, the ultimate man's man, attentive, caring, responsible and active. Courtney had lost her parents at an early age and had experienced the harsh realities of life to the fullest. But after meeting Matt, she had felt like a little girl again, protected from adversity by a strong wall. And for all 10 years, that wall had never failed. However, a year ago, it crumbled, along with the car that went off the cliff, taking Matt with it. Not a day went by that Courtney didn't remember her late husband, bitterly regretting the quarrels they had during their last year together. But why had she clung to their problems? Yes, he had frequent business trips. So what? At least no one ever saw Matt lying on the sofa in front of the TV and idle. Yes, he was nervous because of the pressure at work, but he rarely snapped first. And yes, back then, there were some money worries. But what were they compared to what she had now? So why had she become so intolerant? After all, Matt had always avoided conflict, even escaping to their summer house for a week to prevent arguments. He had a really difficult job with enormous responsibility, trying to find a subcontractor to fulfill the order and maintain quality, all within the required time frame, without leading the company into losses. There was a lot of money in circulation, and Matt was responsible for it. Thinking like that, Courtney didn't notice how her tears dripped on the thin fabric of her unfinished blouse, leaving wet, blurred spots on it. Why does the epiphany always come so late? Why do we truly begin to appreciate only what we have irrevocably lost? Courtney bitterly realized that no one would take time out of their busy schedule to just ask, "Dear, how are you?" But dear Matt called even from the other end of the country, and from hundreds of kilometers away. You could hear in his voice how tired he was at that moment. And this summer house, which she hated so much because her husband preferred solitude there over her companionship here. It was actually just a den for him, a place where he could escape the tension in their family. And this summer house was now the subject of much thought. Money was catastrophically lacking because the earnings from sewing were little. And then there were these loans, with the interest too, unbearable. In the end, the woman could end up without an apartment. During the time that Courtney was recovering from the worst depression after Matt's death, no one took care of these loans, and the interest was steadily growing. And her son Joey needed money for medicine as he was sick all the time. Therefore, deep inside, Courtney understood that the question with summer house selling has already been answered. For some reason, going to the country house was a little scary. Courtney had never been there. This plot of land had appeared in their family recently, just a couple of years ago, after Matt's mother's death, and Courtney's husband's full and undivided use of it. However, he was against Courtney going there, arguing that it was his property and his personal space, to which he had every right. Courtney hadn't come here until now, because she hated this inheritance of her husband, perceiving it as the main separator and rival in their broken life. But there was no more time to put it off, and finally, Courteney decided to go there this weekend with her son. After all, maybe that house with a plot of land was worth something and would help her get out of debt. Fortunately, the day was sunny and the train was half empty. Joey, who had grown tired of the city, was turning his head, looking at the rural scenery floating outside the window. For a city boy, everything was interesting. Cows grazing in the meadow, geese splashing in a tiny stream, and a goat nibbling grass around a peg hammered into the ground. At one point, enthusiastic Joey even said, "Mum, if the summer house is as good, maybe we can move there to live." But Courteney sadly replied, "It is unlikely," and stroked her son's head. And she was right. After a short wander around the village, the house she had found didn't evoke such a desire at all. The old shabby house looked uncomfortable, the shriveled shutters, cracked paint on the facade, and the dust-covered windows made her feel sad and wistful. Courteney was even a little upset. How much money will they give for such a shabby house? Will it be enough to repay the loan? She decided to talk to the neighbours. They must know about it. Not counting on reassuring news, Courteney knocked on the gate of the neighbouring house. An elderly, smiling woman came out and unexpectedly calmed the already despairing woman. "Oh, honey, don't be upset. The house is nothing. All new owners demolish them. But the land here is valuable. The place is good. The forest, the river nearby, and at the same time close to the city. You'll get a good price for your plot." When the elderly woman named the minimum sum, Courteney was astonished, for it would solve most of her problems. She drove home inspired. She quickly advertised on a real estate website and decided to spread the word locally. In a day, white squares of paper with large letters, "For sale," were displayed not only on the fence of the plot, but also on the local bulletin board and even at the railway station. The call came the next day, as if the potential buyer was just waiting for the news of the sale. Courteney could tell from the voice that the caller was a young woman, and she wanted to look at the plot urgently. Leaving Joey at home, who was raring to go to the country house, but had contracted some virus again, Courteney rushed to the train. It was not good to keep the buyer waiting. On the way, vague doubts overcame her. Somehow it seemed that she was betraying Matt's memory by selling a place so dear to his heart. Her heart whimpered and found no rest. But the circumstances dictated their own, and, holding her heart, Courteney hurried to the gate, where a potential buyer was waiting for her. It took a few minutes to open the door. The lock had noticeably rusted during the downtime, making it very difficult to turn the key in the locking mechanism. Finally, the door was opened, and the women entered the house. Contrary to expectations, it was cosy and comfortable inside, if you closed your eyes to the dust and cobwebs that had accumulated during the time of human absence. The buyer walked through the rooms as confidently as if she had been here before. After a brief look around the house, and without even trying to negotiate the price, she offered to close the deal as soon as possible. Courteney, pleasantly surprised, immediately agreed, and the buyer decided to walk through the garden as well. Left alone, Courteney decided to take a closer look at the house that had been so dear to her late husband. The old furniture with carved wooden curls, and the same leather sofa with a lace napkin on the back. It seemed like this house had witnessed more than one generation of the family. The faded chintz-coloured wallpaper and the porcelain knickknacks on the shelf all exuded the scent of former coziness and family warmth. Courteney started to understand why Matt felt so comfortable here. The house preserved the memories of previous generations, who understood the value of a home and were not burdened by the current frenetic pace. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a half-opened black paper. Carefully, Courteney pulled out the bag and peered inside. It contained a collection of photos of her and Matt from different years. There they were, not yet married, enjoying a park ride on the Ferris wheel. Then their wedding, with Courteney signing with a trembling hand and Matt, young and in love, unable to take his eyes off her. There was a photo of 3-month-old Joey lying on his stomach and smiling with his toothless mouth, and another photo of them, all grown up, riding a boat together. A whole life passed before her eyes, happy, carefree, and intending to last until old age. Suddenly, Courteney's hand trembled. She was holding a very recent photograph from last year, judging by the date, which showed Matt with a young woman and a baby in his arms. Upon closer inspection, she was shocked to see that the woman, who now walking in the garden and was about to become the new owner of the house, was standing next to Matt, smiling and beautiful. Courteney's heart sank. So that's why Matt hadn't been home for weeks. That's why he never called her to come here and even resisted it. How could he? It would have been better if he had just left, instead of living like this with 2 families. She had always believed that her husband couldn't lie, yet she was always a terrible judge of character. Anger, mixed with bitter disappointment, clouded Courteney's mind and prevented her from shedding angry tears. At that moment, footsteps were heard on the porch, and the woman from the picture entered the room. Courteney gasped, overwhelmed by the feelings. "You! It's you! How dare you intrude into our lives, and now into our home? Why did you want my husband? Why did you ruin our lives? Did it make you happy?" Courteney, maddened by the unexpected discovery, believed that it was because of this damn woman that all their quarrels with Matt had started. She thought it was because of her that Matt had fallen off the cliff, unable to bear the strain of living in 2 houses. "Wait," said the strange customer surprisingly calmly. "I understand your feelings, but please listen to me carefully. I will tell you the real story of the events that took place. It is somewhat different from the thoughts that arise when you look at the photo. Let's get acquainted first. My name is Maggie, and I know your name and who you are." Courteney was discouraged and silent. Maggie's calmness confounded her. A woman who had been brought out into the open would not behave like that. So, after a pause, Courteney pulled herself together and nodded to Maggie, saying, "I'm listening to you attentively. Okay, I was married to a rather wealthy man. However, this did not bring me any happiness. If I had been older and more experienced, I probably would have figured everything out and not married him at all. But I was completely naive, and he was self-confident, self-sufficient, determined, and much older than me. At the time, it seemed to me like reliability and strength. But the power turned out to be very destructive. Rapidly after the wedding, the gallant cavalier turned into a domestic despot. He considered me as much his property as his house, his car, and his firm. Even the security guard had more personal independence because he could resign from his job. I was condemned. Sentenced to hang on his every word, sentenced not to have any opinion of her own, but only to listen with the instinct of a chained animal to all the nuances of his mood. I couldn't have anything personal, no friends, no relatives, no interests, not even pocket money. Only he, my lord and master. At first I loved him, attributing his difficult behaviour to the challenges he had faced, and even naively hoped to soften him with my love. But all hope abandon ye who enter here. It turned out to be a complete utopia. I still don't know exactly what in his life caused such inferiority and thirst for absolute and despotic power. At first, the hardships were only mental, and then he began to assault. That was the first time I tried to leave, but I was caught halfway and brought back. For science, I still have a scar from a cut with a broken whiskey bottle. And then I realized I was pregnant. My husband slowed down for a while. No, there was still no freedom, but I tried to keep my fists to myself. In due time, David was born, a strong, healthy boy. And then it started. In his opinion, sometimes I didn't smile warmly enough when my husband returned. Then I was too busy with the child and didn't listen very attentively. Then I dropped the fork while handing it to him. The punishment followed instantly, and it could be anything. The fear for David that he would be left without me in the clutches of this monster grew every day like an avalanche. And one day, this avalanche broke loose. I accidentally smashed his favourite statue of an Indian dancer while cleaning. He could contemplate it for hours, and it always brought this despot to a relatively peaceful state. I couldn't imagine what would happen to me. Horrified, I grabbed the child and ran out of the house. And where could I run to? Security was everywhere. Fortunately for me, there was a shift change, and the guard, who had just finished his shift, drove his car to the gate. Taking advantage of his conversation with the new shift worker, I quietly got into the trunk unnoticed. The chances of escape were, of course, slim, but even one chance meant a lot to me. The car started moving, and thankfully, David fell asleep. After a while, I realized from the sounds that the car had stopped at a gas station, and the guard went to pay for gasoline. I couldn't wait any longer. I opened the trunk and jumped out in front of the astonished gas station attendant on the ground, running away with the baby in my arms. There was a railway station nearby, and I managed to jump onto the train that was already prepared to depart. The gas station attendant apparently preferred not to get involved in a strange case, so there was no pursuit either along the train or at the next station. But I wasn't deluded. As soon as my husband returns home, he will immediately order a review of the security cameras and send his people on our trail. Therefore, after recovering a little, I got off at an unfamiliar village after a couple of stations. It was getting dark. Slowly the rain began to fall. I walked along the side of the road with a whimpering David, having absolutely no idea what to do. Suddenly, a car slowed down nearby. I was startled, but the man behind the wheel was alone and politely asked if he could help me with anything. I had no other choice. I got into the car at my own risk and told my story without hiding anything. Matt brought us to this house and told us to settle down for the night. And then he asked me to live here. I swear we never had a relationship. He was loyal to one woman and loved only you. He was also deeply concerned about your family's frequent quarrels. Despite his outward masculinity, he was vulnerable. He would often show me your family photos and reminisce about the smallest details of your life. Perhaps it was easier for him to trust me as a stranger. He had a secret hobby in this house, which he was ashamed of and considered almost a weakness. Once, trying to cope with a bad mood, Matt tried to carve a wooden piece and got carried away. Interestingly, the more troubled he felt, the more beautiful the wooden figures turned out to be. His main focus was on creating natural-looking beasts. He even attempted to sell them, and they were quickly bought at good prices. That's how I quietly and secretly lived here, until I learned that my husband had a massive stroke during another fit of rage, rendering him helpless like a child. I immediately arranged for him to be placed in a private clinic, and now I am the legal manager of his funds, due to his complete incapacity. "So, what do you need this summer house for now?" asked Courteney, who had become subdued. "As a memory? A reminder of the misfortune, the good man, and the fact that desperate determination sometimes yields results. It is also a testament to the fact that real miracles can be performed by ordinary people." Courteney returned home in a sad and contemplative mood. How poorly she knew her own husband. Even a complete strange woman had gotten a better look at him than she had. Matt, it seemed, was almost afraid of appearing weak to his wife and not living up to his reputation as the invulnerable head of the family. He even kept in secret his creation of wooden figures of animals to avoid nagging from his wife. And they had a figurine, one that Matt had given Joey shortly before his death. It was a large carved bear standing on its hind legs. The bear raised its front legs as if warning of a possible attack or preparing to defend itself. Despite the dynamic pose, the bear was still cute and good-natured. Apparently, her husband liked the toy very much and didn't sell it. He claimed to have bought it at a market. It's like this. You live with a man and it turns out that you live not in one world, but in two parallel ones. The deal for the plot was done quickly and all the paperwork was in order. But after the sale, the two women, bound by a common memory, didn't want to part ways. Maggie often invited Courteney to the summer house, much to the joy of Joey. They spent their good time having lovely conversations, making jam from apples, strawberries and sharing plans. Due to the lack of siblings, Joey took on the role of a caretaker for the still young David and gradually became a true babysitter. The money earned from the cottage helped pay off the loans. Overall, life started to improve, and the sharp pain of loss slowly gave way to Courteney's lighter, memory-filled sadness. However, they still didn't have enough money to live on. Courteney had been trying to find a better-paying job, but so far she had not succeeded. She felt out of touch as life moved forward and required new skills that she didn't possess. She had to urgently come up with something. Courteney firmly rejected all of Maggie's attempts to help with money. It was enough buying this summer cottage, where she and Joey regularly visited on an equal footing with the new owner, as if they had never sold it at all. One cloudy autumn day, while preoccupied with thoughts of their survival, Courteney suddenly heard a loud knock and Joey's desperate wailing. Rushing into the room with her heart pounding, she discovered a carved wooden bear with a broken paw that had fallen from the shelf, and her son sobbing inconsolably over the damaged toy. Her heart eased, and she said while picking up the figure from the floor, "Joey, stop crying like that right now. You scared me half to death. It's made of wood. You can glue it back together." Curiously, but the figurine was hollow inside. Intrigued, Courteney shone the flashlight on her cell phone and looked inside. To her surprise, she found money wrapped in a tube, along with a printout from a website selling handmade works. Overwhelmed, Courteney quickly sat down in a chair. "Matt, you're still helping your family even after your death. Why did you hide your talent? The carvings you made with love brought in so much money. I guess you wanted to surprise your son later when he's all grown up, but you didn't have time." Unable to contain her emotions, Courteney covered her face with an apron and burst into tears, releasing the sorrow from the depths of her soul. The broken bear figurine became the catalyst for Courteney to start her own small business. After much consideration, she made a seemingly unprofitable decision. Courteney chose to sell flowers. Yes, it was a demanding and fickle product, but it was also familiar and close to her heart. Courteney had loved flowers since childhood, planting them in abundance on windowsills, in the entrance garden, and in her grandmother's front yard. Flowers were like special creatures to her, each with their own unique traits and even moods. She could talk to them, sing soulful songs to them, care for them, and witness their buds and young leaves bloom in response. Courteney firmly believed that success could only be achieved in a business that one truly loved. Therefore, she chose to focus on flowers, both indoor and cut flowers. Soon, Courteney opened a pavilion in town. From its windows, tight rosebuds carnation blooms, sunny gerbera caps, and a variety of azaleas, orchids, violets, gardenias, and other exotic flowers from warm tropical countries looked out on people. The trade flourished. Courteney, knowing the character of each plant, willingly shared secrets and care tips with customers. She mastered the art of creating floral compositions and immersed herself in studying the peculiarities of flower sales. Her innate taste and sense of style became invaluable assets. The compositions she created were exquisite and unique, and Courteney gradually started building her own circle of loyal customers, which of course included Maggie. Immersed in floral advertising brochures, the women already planned their spring gardening at the summer house. They discussed which flowers and bushes to plant, where to create a flower bed, and where to place the curly stems of clematis and bush roses. Unbeknownst to them, February passed by in cares and troubles, and with it came Matt's birthday. The women gathered at the cemetery. The day was clear and not too frosty. Attending the church before the cemetery gave them a special mood, and the grief of their loss took on new notes of reverence for the inevitable eternity. The cemetery was deserted. "It's a symbolic triumph of life over death," Maggie said thoughtfully, tossing some peanut kernels she had found in her pocket onto the trampled snow. To reach Matt's grave, they had to walk through the deep snow that covered the graves, resembling a fluffy, untouched, snow-white carpet. The grave mound was barely visible under the snow, and from a small monument made of marble chips, the smiling, lively face of the man who had meant so much to both women looked back at them. Courteney, unable to hold back her tears, sobbed, while Maggie remained silent and composed. "We couldn't even put up a proper gravestone for Matt," Courteney sobbed through her tears. "Do you really think the deceased need gravestones from us?" Maggie suddenly raised her eyes sternly. "They need our memory, and a gravestone is just a way to console ourselves, to say, 'I did everything I could, I spared no expense.'" The women stood for a while longer. Courteney asked her husband's forgiveness, while Maggie whispered a quiet prayer. The short winter day was about to enter its evening. Embracing each other, the friends made their way to the cemetery exit. From that day on, Courteney's exhausted and tormented soul slowly calmed down. Her thoughts became clearer, and the burden of remorse became lighter. Spring arrived quickly, and one day Courteney received a call from an unknown number on her phone. "Courteney Tyler? It's the police. We would like to talk to you about your late husband." Courteney felt a sudden tension, her body growing cold as an icy lump formed in her stomach. "What's the case? My husband died a year and a half ago in an accident," she responded. The confident male voice on the other end of the line provided an address and instructed her to come tomorrow at 9 o'clock for further clarification. Throughout the night, Courteney tossed and turned, unable to find rest. What possible business could her husband Matt have had? Was he involved in something illicit? She couldn't fathom what wrong her law-abiding and morally upright husband could have done. No criminal thoughts crossed Courteney's weary mind. The next morning, the stern detective began questioning Courteney about her husband's official contacts, the problems he shared, what he discussed, and how he spoke of his superiors and co-workers. Completely bewildered, Courteney struggled to recall any relevant information, but due to the strained relationship she had with Matt, her knowledge was scarce. "Yes, it turns out that your husband did not share any official information with you. That's a pity." The policeman scratched behind his ear with displeasure. "You know, we have suspicions that Matt's death was not accidental at all." "Killed? Matt was killed? For what? This is a crystal man." Courteney whispered in shock, and a sudden surge of rage snatched the right piece from the farthest corners of the brain. I have Matt's flash drive. He forgot it that last day, right in his laptop. I do not know what is there. I was not up to it afterwards. But maybe it will be useful to you. The policeman brightened his face. Flash drive? Do you have it? Let's go, time is running out. And getting into his car, they quickly drove to Courtney's house. The policeman, having received the coveted evidence, decided to look at it right away, right at Courtney's. She went to make tea for the guest, and the man buried his head in a pile of tables and copies of documents. 10 minutes later, the obviously delighted policeman agreed to drink tea. Your flash drive is a gift of fate, he confessed, crunching the cookie. I was afraid that I got another unsolved case. I had some suspicions, but there was no concrete evidence to hold on to. Now, I'll pursue the case. He squinted unkindly, and this squint did not bode well for the culprits. Is it possible to ask anything? Courtney asked cautiously. Frankly speaking, it is impossible, the man confirmed. We will see this case through to the end, and then you will find out everything. To fill the impending silence, he asked, Is it difficult for you and your son without a breadwinner, perhaps? It's not like that anymore, Courtney replied. I managed to open a flower kiosk. If you come to my shop, I'll put together the best bouquet for your wife. The policeman suddenly frowned. A bouquet won't be necessary. I buried my wife 3 years ago. Ectopic pregnancy, bleeding. We couldn't save her. Now my Benny and Tommy are growing up without a mother. Do you have sons? Courtney asked. Not just sons, but twins, the man smiled. Well, I must be going. Thank you for the tea. If there's anything else I can do to help, Courtney stammered. Oh, I don't even know how to address you. My name is Gunther. The policeman smiled and hurried to the car. The case of Matt's death was truly brought to a close. During the trial, Courtney discovered that her husband had uncovered information indicating that some members of the company's management were embezzling money by using fraudulent documents to divert funds into their personal accounts. Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to share this with impartial members of the board of directors. The SUV that abruptly cut him off while overtaking successfully achieved its goal. Matt lost control of the car and plunged off a cliff. Gunther personally invited Courtney to the hearing. It was incredibly difficult, but in Courtney's opinion it was absolutely necessary. She wanted to witness for herself whether justice would prevail for the people who had taken away her most precious things. This time, justice had prevailed, as the evidence was undeniable. However, to her surprise, Courtney did not feel much relief. Matt won't come back anyway, and she believed that these people were blind men playing with each other's lives and unrepentant. A few months later, Courtney was cleaning up the withered grass on Matt's grave. This time, she was alone. For a long time, she had been tormented by one question with no definite answer. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak to her dead husband, looking at his smiling picture on the monument. Matt, please don't take offense, but I have to tell you something. The policeman who was involved in your case and gathered evidence against all the culprits, well, he proposed to me. He's a widower too and is raising 2 boys on his own. It wouldn't be good for them to grow up without a mother. And Joey is growing up. He could use a strong father figure. Gunther. He's a good and reliable man. Matt, would you be upset if I accepted his proposal? Courtney stared intently at her husband's picture, as if he could truly answer her. But Matt's smile remained the same, forever cheerful and young. Gradually, the tension that had built up inside her began to dissipate, replaced by the calm confidence of someone who had made the right choice in life. "I'll try to be a really good wife this time," Courteney thought, as she raked the gathered grass into a bag and placed a bunch of bright crimson terry asters on the grate.